another thing we saw was that we have a TikiWiki program running on our Linux system. That TikiWiki. So we saw that this one had a Metasploit module when we looked at the open source vulnerability database. So let's use Metasploit for this one. We've kind of neglected our Metasploit. I love some Metasploit, so let's do a search for TikiWiki. Looks like we actually have a few TikiWikis. If we do an info on one of these, how about, well, it needs to be an exploit, so let's do the first exploit. So info on exploit, Unix, web app, PHP underscore XML, RPC underscore val. So remember we were at open source vulnerability database and 17793. What was our open source vulnerability database before? Well, we should have taken better notes. Let's see if it's in our URL history. Looks like 4478 is in our URL history. And that's, of course, sends me to suddenlink. So what was it? 4478. Well, it takes me to exploit DB. But if we went back to our NICTO output, we would see that 4478 is the right one. Here's our PDB. And so this is our TikiWiki graph formula. So actually the one we chose is not correct. We actually want probably this one, right? Looks right by the name. We do an info on this one. 4478. So that is indeed the correct one. So we would have to verify this based on our open source vulnerability database number or our CVE number or something like that. Because in this case there is more than one and we certainly don't want to send off the wrong one. So let's use that one. So this is an exploit, so we show options. We don't need to set any proxies here or the vhost. The URI is by default TikiWiki, which is correct in our case. Our port also correct, 80. So it looks like our host is the only thing we need to change. Set our host IP address of our Linux target, 80 in my case. And we can show our payloads. And since this is PHP based as well, we'll actually end up with our PHP payloads here as well. We can set payload PHP interpreter reverse underscore TCP or one of the other ones. We should know our options. I'm using it before. Exploit. And this one actually gets database information as well. We don't see the database listening on a port here, but we do get information about the backend database. It is listening on localhost, and it has the default credentials here, Tiki and Tiki password. So it might be worth, once we get on that box, taking a look at it locally, see if there's any interesting information in there. Again, there's not. We haven't added anything, but you never know. I mean, I've had clients who store a lot of sensitive data in their wikis. Have actually worked for people who do the same thing, actually keep a lot of their customer data in a wiki, like do their reporting, sharing there, and things like that. So it may be worth taking a look at a corporate wiki, particularly one that requires login. It's a fairly common way of sharing data. But we do get another session, this time on Linux. And it's again PHP based. And we are this time actually an unprivileged user. The better way to do web servers is like this, to give web servers unprivileged access. Microsoft IIS does the same thing, your IWAM, which is about as unprivileged as you can get. We saw that our XAMPP web server is actually running as a system service, which is a big no-no security-wise, but unfortunately that's generally how our Apache Friends type web servers install on Windows. You either start them manually as an administrative user each time or install them as a system service and then they run a system, which is, again, unfortunate, but, you know, it happens. Functionality over security, right? So Metasploit made this pretty easy. On our last few, we've done these manually, and you could certainly figure out what the vulnerability is in the PHP code and figure out how to create this manually. We'll look at using public exploit code when we get into our post-exploitation and look at privilege escalation. So we will see some options of doing this a little bit more manually, but this is a good one to just use Metasploit for.